Hello, lovely makers. Welcome to the Miss Leela podcast, episode 9. It has been a little while. Every time I start, I forget how to start. It's been a little while. I was hoping to record 2 weeks ago, but yet again I fell ill with a chest cold. And whenever I get a cold now, I get this chesty thing and I get a cough. And I wasn't feeling very well, and I was quite tired, and I didn't really want to sit here and be endlessly coughing whilst chatting to you. So I decided to put it off for a week. So that meant that I was supposed to record last week, but I thought I was getting better during the week, and then on the weekend I came down even worse than before. And I wasn't sleeping very well, so I was really tired, and again I was coughing so much. Every time I was talking I would cough, so I put it off for another weekend. So here we are, 2 weeks late, but nonetheless here we are. I have to remind myself to look at the little camera on my phone, which I'm now staring at, and not my face, so forgive me if it looks like I'm not looking at you. I'm recording on my camera. I'm recording in a new spot in my studio. I thought I'd record today with my mini quilt wall behind me. And the lighting seems to be pretty good. I don't know if that's because it's an overcast day today. That might be helping with the lighting issue as well. But things are looking pretty true to colour, so that's always a bonus. Okay, so where you can find me. I'm Miss Leela all over the internet, in various places. I'll put links in the description box below, but you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Ravelry. There's a podcast group on Ravelry for this podcast, the Miss Leela I can never remember what it is. If you search Miss Leela, it should come up, but I'll put a link below anyway. My Etsy shop and my blog / website, Pinterest. I think that's all the places that I am where you can find me. And I'll put links to all that below. Okay, so let's jump into it. I'm going to start with a new segment today, and that is Leela's weather report, because at some point in the podcast I always seem to talk about the weather, so I thought I would just give it its own little section of the podcast and put it at the beginning and get it over and done with, so that I don't blabber on about it at some other point in the podcast. So, the weather report. Spring is in the air. We have been having yo-yo temperatures between winter and early summer, so we've had a couple of days where it's been, around the 27 to 30 degree days, and then the next day it'll be 16 degrees. So a bit of yo-yoing in the temps there, but we have been enjoying some lovely early spring, sunny, warm weather until yesterday. We've had a couple of rainy days before yesterday, but yesterday it rained all day. It rained all night last night, and it's not raining at the moment, but it was raining this morning, which is absolutely wonderful. We so need the rain. Pretty much the entire of New South Wales and most of Queensland are in severe drought at the moment, and we had a really, really dry autumn and winter. Pretty much we've just been having a really dry year and years. But yes, it was some lovely soaking rain yesterday and overnight, and it's definitely not going to break the drought by any means. Some regional areas haven't even had any rain over the last day or two, but there are some areas that have recorded more rain in one day than they've had in 4 years, I heard on the radio this morning. So when you think about that, it's been pretty dry. So that's fantastic. All right, that's it. Weather done. Now we don't have to talk about it anymore. Fingers crossed it doesn't come up again. Okay, so because it's been a little while since I podcasted, I've got quite a few things to share with you today. I have one finished object, quite a few works in progress, some goodies to share, some exciting, other exciting things that have happened to Miss Leela over the past couple of months, because I think my last podcast was in August. So let's get started. So, just going to take a sip of tea. It might still be, I'm probably going to burn myself. It's probably too hot still. Yep, too hot. But I am drinking creme brulee tea by T2 today. Okay, let's get started. So, you will have seen this on Instagram, and I recently did a blog post on my latest mini quilt that I have finished, which I have called my Flower Power mini quilt. It is finally done. So, look at all of those 1/4-inch hexagons. Okay, so I started this, I had the idea and started this quilt many years ago, not long after I finished my first Garden of Patience, which is the first time I had used 1/4-inch hexagons. I decided that I wanted to create a big hexagon flower and that the petals would all be made from 1/4-inch hexies. So I can't remember which ones I had already started. I think I had this one finished. I can't remember now, but I had completed some of the petals and I had some of the other ones started, and then there were some that I hadn't started at all. So this year I got them all out and decided that I was going to finish it. So I had the piecing done quite a while ago, but I just hadn't finished the quilting on the border and binding it off. But essentially what it is I've got like creams and ivories, one in the center, then you've got red, yellow, green, blue, purple and pink. And then I had to decide how I was going to square off the flower. So I considered a couple of things. I considered doing like doing a border and then doing lots of just individual 1/4-inch flowers in multicolours in the corners, or doing red multicolored flower. So I sort of like ummed and ahed, but in the end I decided to not square it off, but make it into one big pieced hexagon. And I decided to do that with diamond shapes in the corners, using ivories and whites and creamy colours. And then I hand appliqued the entire pieced area onto some just plain cotton, sort of a creamy ivory beige, light beige fabric. On the back I just raided my stash and I just have used this blue and white spot. And then I ummed and ahed with the binding colour. I trialled a couple of different just plain colours, but in the end I went with this. It's kind of a greyed off, oh, it's a warm taupey grey colour. And that just, I really wanted this to be the focus, so I didn't want the borders and the binding to really take it over. And then, so the way that I constructed it was to get the piece section onto the backing fabric. I actually used a really big piece of like a Visifix bonding, you know, those bonding sort of heat papers. And then what I did was I appliqued all along the 6 sides onto the backing fabric to secure it. And then when it came to quilting, I didn't want to do any visible quilting over the top because I thought it would detract away from all the little hexagons. I wanted this to be on show, and I didn't want to see any quilting. So what I came up with was I followed like the lines of the hexagon petal and center shape, so all along here, so they're on the center, then up the side here and up this side and this side on each one, so up each sort of connecting sides. And what I did was I came up in, so what I did was I would come up in, let me see, in the corner here, like between the 3 hexagons, so that little corner, I'd come up, do a really tiny stitch and go back down in that corner, and then I'd come to the next corner, so I would come to here. And I'd come up, do a really little stitch and come back down. So I was literally doing really tiny stitches on the front so that you really wouldn't see them. But on the back, and because it's not very attractive on the back, but you don't see the back. So you can see on the back here, it created quite large, and you can see they're like a zigzag stitch because they're going from corner to corner. So that's how I sort of sandwiched the whole quilt together, because I do have a very thin, I think I used a iron-on pellon, a very thin iron-on pellon on this one. I didn't use quilting fabric, but it's very thin, like you can hardly even, like you can see how thin it is. Because this bit is quite padded because of all the seam allowance in the back of it, so I didn't want to do any kind of thick wadding or anything. And then I decided to machine quilt some lines along the border, and I decided to do just radiate out. So what I actually did was I came out 1/4 inch, and then I came out 3/8 of an inch. No, I came out 1/2 an inch, then 3/4 of an inch for the next line, and then that left me with pretty much another 1/2 inch and then the 1/4 inch binding. So that symmetry just kind of worked out really well. And I did the binding on the front is sort of 1/4 inch because I wanted it quite thin. On the back it looks a bit wider, it's more like a 1/2 inch. And then to hang it, I've done my 2 different types. So I've got a sleeve so that I can put a rod through the back and hang it that way, or I've put the little ribbon tabs so that you can just hook it onto some wall hooks on the wall. So yeah, so that's the finished quilt, and I'm really proud of it. I really love it. It's such a good feeling to finish such a long work in progress, or something that was started a while ago and then just put in my basket of EPP MIPS, makes in progress, and I just sort of like moved on with other projects. But this year I said to myself, I really want to finish projects that I've started, because I really want to have lots of sample miniature quilts using the smaller sized papers, because obviously I sell my papers in my shop, and I'm expanding that range and expanding the quantities available, and I really wanted to have quilts that show off the different shapes and the sizes. So that's my, yeah. So far this year I have made 1, 2, 3, 4 miniature quilts, and I have another, I've got 3 hanging up over there that I'm gonna hopefully finish by the end of the year. Oh, and another one in progress as well, so I've got 4 to finish. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good for me anyway. I like to start projects and not finish them for a while, so yeah. So that's Flower Power. So some stats for you. There is a blog post on my website and all about, there's lots of pictures and the progress of how I made it. So you can head over there and check it out. But I'll read you through just the stats, just if you're interested. Just going to try my tea and see if it's... I'm not looking at the camera, I'm looking at myself again. That's getting better. Okay, I'll hold it up while I do it. See if I can hold it up and read. Is that in the camera? Okay. Oh, actually, you probably won't be able to hear me if I do that. I'll do this. Okay, so I've got them written out. So the finished quilt size, so each hexagon side measures 3.5 inches. So that's, 11.5 inches. So that's like this. No, that can't be right. Oh, that's the whole thing. So this, like the, where am I? This side of the pieced hexagon, that measures 3.5 inches. The total width, so from here to here, of the pieced section, is 23 inches, and the height, so from there to there, is 20 inches. Then the finished piece side, no, sorry, that's the finished quilt size. So that's this side, this width, and this height. Then the finished pieced size, so this length was 8.5 inches. The width from the pieced bit to the pieced bit, that was 17.5, and the height is 15.25. So that's the piece section. The binding is 1/4 inch. The hexagon piece size, I've got a spelling error here, I'm gonna have to go and fix that, is 1/4 inch, so they're 1/4 inch hexagons. The hexagon center and petal individual hexi count. Okay, so each petal and the center, there is a hexi count of 127. So there's 127 pink hexes, 127 red, etc., etc. The total count for the 7 petal blocks, or the 6 petal blocks and the center block, is 889 hexagons. Then the diamond, so each diamond block has 42 hexagons. So there's total of 6 diamond blocks, so that's a total of 252 hexagons. So that brings up the grand total of 1/4 inch hexes is 1,141. That's a lot of hexes, all hand pieced together. Okay, so then time. Now, when I started this, I didn't actually write down my time. So I've had to approximate a little bit. So I've got here hexi prep of 7.5 hours. So that's cutting out, basting the hexi pieces. But that's a pretty conservative time. That's the time that I have, that's the time that I have written down this year working on it. So that doesn't include all the time many years ago when I first started the project. So there will be actually, I don't know, you might triple that maybe, that time. And that's just prepping the hexagons themselves. The hexi flower piecing in each individual petal. So because I didn't actually write it down, and then this year when I started back up again, I didn't write it down either for some reason. But I sort of went off the hexi count on another project that I had written the time down. They were very similar quantity of hexagons. So I've approximated that each petal took 15 hours to piece. So the total then for the 7 hexi petals would be 105 hours. So that's piecing the center and the 6 petals. Piecing the petals together. So I'd make each petal individually and then I'd piece them together. So I started piecing them to the center block and then piecing up the sides. So piecing all of the petals together to form the flower. That took 8.5 hours. Piecing the diamond borders on took 24.5 hours. So I didn't actually make these as blocks and then piece them on. I just went row by row and pieced them to the petals. So that was 24.5 hours. To applique the whole pieced section onto the backing fabric was 4.5 hours. Quilting took 4 hours. Finishing and binding took 4 hours. So the grand total time to make this miniature quilt was 158 hours. That's a lot of sewing. That's a lot of hand sewing, a lot of little tiny stitches. But look at it. Totally worth it. So that's Flower Power Mini Quilt. All finished, and it hangs in that big gap there, which my head is now filling at the moment. Okay. All right. So that's my only finished object for this episode, but I have quite a few makes in progress. So we'll keep with the paper piecing. So I'm working on my last Liberty miniature quilt using the Liberty fabrics I got in the Westwood Acres Liberty Club for the month of July. So I'm a bit late with this one because I was getting some other things done. But anyway, so can't remember if I even showed this on the last episode or not. But this is my next miniature quilt. So I've used, sorry, I'm going to talk like this because I'm not sure if you can hear me when I hold it in front of me. So I've used 3/4 inch hexagons, 3/4 inch diamonds, and 3/4 inch half hexagons. And I've just created the fabrics in this particular month were lots of pretty florals. As you can see, these are all from that month. So I thought flowers. I just thought spring garden flowers. So I decided to do flowers, and I used Liberty plain fabrics in the center that I had used in my last one. And then I wanted to connect them in a different way than I had previously. So I decided to connect them petal point to petal point, which meant that I needed a diamond in between. So what I decided to do was do like a row of diamonds and then connect hexagons this way, and I chose a nice fresh spring green colour. So it kind of creates like the leaves. But I really like this shape that it creates, which is quite nice. And then on the top, to square it off, I've got half hexagons along the top and along the bottom. And then I ran out of that green fabric, and I was like, how am I going to square it off? Because I wanted to have it squared off, but I was like, oh, maybe I don't square it off. Maybe I just applique it to a backing fabric. But I was like, no, I think that's going to look funny having like this jagged. So I went back to my stash, and the closest green that I could find was a lot paler. So it's a bit paler, and these are half diamonds. Well, they obviously make a triangle, but it's half the size of one of the diamonds. So I did that, and I actually think it's come up pretty good. It looks intentional to me, which is bonus. I think because they're such a smaller shape, it actually looks quite good that they're a bit lighter, and it blends it into the border fabric, which I picked just a nice soft lemony yellow colour. So I'll show you the individual flowers. Yeah. So the border, the way that I do the borders is I decide what size I want them, and then I paper piece them. So I cut strips in the cardboard, and then sometimes I have to join them because they're here with sticky tape to get the length that I need. And then I glue baste them the same way I would glue baste the shapes, and then I hand sew them on. And that way I get a really nice, clean, crisp, straight border. And it just frames it off really nicely. So I make sure that I've got a 1/4 inch seam, so that when I take this paper out and I fold it and I'll iron it, and then I'll quilt it, and then when I sew the binding, I know that I've got a 1/4 inch to allow for the binding to come up, and that way I'll get an even border. So yeah, that's Liberty number 3 mosaic. That's not what the finished name's going to be. I'm not sure what the finished name is going to be for this one or this one yet. I need to actually pick names. And I still haven't decided the name on this one either. I really find it really hard coming up with names. The Flower Power one, that was easy. But I find it really hard coming up with names for my quilt designs. So, any suggestions? What do you think? I mean, Spring Garden, we could do Spring Garden, but that sounds a bit, I don't know, predictable maybe. But yeah. So now I just need to pick some, well, I've already picked the backing fabric. So I'm going to use, this is from my stash, I'm going to use this backing fabric. And for the binding, I'm just going to use the same yellow, I think, to bind it. I don't really want to add another colour so that binding will sort of look like that. Or I think I did contemplate using a very pale pink, because this is a very pale pink in it, but I think I've decided, I don't know, what do you think? I could do just the yellow. I'm kind of thinking just the yellow. I don't really want to add another colour to it because there's so many colours in here. I think I'm just going to do a 1/4 inch binding just in the yellow. So I have to finish that. I have to work out how I'm going to quilt it. I'm probably going to machine quilt this one. I just need to work out, this is the top, just need to work out how I'm going to quilt. So that's that one. And I'll just continue. I didn't write this one on my list, but it was sitting down here, so I thought I'd show it. So the next making in progress is a cot quilt that I've been working on. That's very overdue for my friend's little baby boy. I tend to make quilts for my friends' kids' first birthdays because I never seem to be able to get them done in time for when they're actually born, and I feel like they don't really need to use a quilt until they're a bit older anyway. So I find that first birthday is kind of like when I gift my quilts, but this particular first birthday was back in April, pretty sure April, so I'm very late. So I'm really trying to get it finished by Christmas, and I don't have much to do now. I just have to finish quilting it, and then I have to do the binding. I think I'll have to stand up for this. So I'm about maybe halfway through quilting it. So I'll stand up. Okay, so I'm going to be able to sew the whole thing. So it's the top, it's a panel quilt, so and panel and piece. So I've got, you can see my quilt lines are drawn there, ready for quilting. And you can see that I use safety pins to baste my quilt. So there's some black arrows, and then I've got strip pieces in a jade green colour, and then I've got some pieced half square triangles in a pale green and That's looking very red, but it's an orange colour. It's a bit better. Then there's a big, this is where the whole quilt started. I found this big sloth kind of Aztec-y print. He's got a little bow and arrow, and the colours that I've chosen have come from, it's going to be my show notes because I'm going to fall down, have come from this, because you can see there's like that jade green and orange and a paler minty green in there, and the arrows. So these fabrics I already had the arrow fabric. So when I found this, I was like, oh, the arrow fabric that I've got will go really well. And then I just had to buy the plain colours. So then you've got the arrow fabric, the sloths. And then you've got more half square triangles with this triangle gold and white. There's actually a metallic gold. You can see that. Then the jade, and then the arrow fabric in reverse, so black and white. And I'm also going to be quilting in different colours too. So the black has white quilting. My scarf's getting stuck in the safety pins. The white panel will have black quilting. Then I've done orange quilting, and I'll do orange quilting on this one as well. And then for this one, I've got this colour, kind of it's more of an emerald green because I didn't have a jade green, but it looks very close. So it's like a colour like this for the quilting of this panel. And I'm just doing diagonal lines, and I've sort of, you can see that I've changed the direction. So these lines are going this way, and then they go this way. And then when you get to the big panel, they're going to go that way, and then so they're kind of doing this down the quilt. Getting stuck in the safety pins. So I'll see if I can stand back a bit further and you can get more of the quilting. Can you see? You can't really see. So that's my cock quilt. So I'm going to try and hopefully get the rest of the quilting finished this weekend, and then I can bind it at night during the week. And then that will be finished. And then I have another quilt that I have to start for a little girl, and her first birthday is in November. So that's going to be late too, because I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get it done in time, because I've got a lot of prep product making to do for a big upcoming market, which I'll talk about a little later. So that's my cock quilt. Just get myself settled again. I keep not looking at the camera. I apologise. Okay, on to some knitting. I actually have a project that I'm working on. I'm not just working on my learning to knit little test thing. I very quickly was getting sick of doing that, because the yarn I'm using for my practice test knitting is just an acrylic yarn, so it doesn't really, it's not the nicest yarn obviously to work with. It doesn't feel very nice, and I was getting, I wasn't enjoying looking at my boo-boos and my mistakes and things, and I thought, I just actually want to make something, and I think I'll enjoy the process more if the item that I'm working on is an item that will be a finished item for something or someone. So, and I decided to just go back to basics and just focus on one technique, and I hope I'm going to call this the right thing. So I'm just doing a garter stitch scarf. I'm making it for Tilly. At the last Brown Owls, last month's Brown Owls meeting I went to, my friend Jazzy from Jazzy Makes, who she dyes beautiful yarn. She brought along all her yarn for us to squish and purchase. And I found this one. And it's not really my colours, but I thought it was a fun, nice, bright one for Tilly. So I'm making Tilly a scarf. Obviously not for this year, it'll be for next year. But this is beautiful. It's so soft and pretty. And this is how far I've gotten with my scarf. So it's coming out maybe a bit bright. Pretty true to colour. Maybe it's coming out a bit darker there, but it's lovely to work with. So much nicer than the acrylic yarn. I haven't dropped any stitches yet. I haven't made any eyelets or holes or boo-boos. And I just try and I actually take it to work with me, and I do like 15 minutes in my lunch break. So I get a few rows done. And yeah, it's really nice. So I cast on 30 stitches, and I'm using size 4.5 needles. Mum gave me these metal needles to try, because before with my practice knitting I was using the bamboo needles, and I was finding my tension was really tight, and using the metal needles my tension has definitely loosened up, and it's much more consistent, and it's a much nicer tension. So, but yeah, so I like using the metal needles much more than the bamboo ones. The only problem I have is that I do have to be careful that I don't drop the stitches off the end, because it is a bit more slippery, obviously. But the couple of cases that I have done that, I've managed to very quickly put them back on the needle. So yeah, so really enjoying that. So this yarn is 100% superwash merino, worsted 4-ply, 100 grams, 200 meters were in the skein. It's very true, pretty true colour there. So very pretty. And there'll be a link in the show notes to Jazzy's shop. She sells her yarn on Etsy. And I'm keeping my project in my Quilt Queen project bag. It's a quilted project bag. So it's quite matchy. So that's it. I'll put that back in there later. So that's my knitting. Then since the last podcast, I've started a new crochet project. So for my birthday, and I'll talk about this a bit later as well, Mum and I and Dad, we went to Skein Sisters. I think I mentioned that I was going in the last podcast. So we went to Skein Sisters, which is in Dulwich Hill, which it's not far from the city. So for us, it's about an hour and 15 minutes or so to get there. But I've been wanting to go for a while, and I'd planned to treat myself for my birthday. My birthday present was going to be yarn. So before I went, I thought, well, I don't want to just buy yarn. I want to have at least one project in mind for purchase of yarn. So I had seen, I first came across this particular crochet and knitwear designer when I was looking for projects for my Make 9, and the head warmer that I made, Tilly, which I showed in the previous I think in the last episode, was by this designer. So her name is Heidi May, and she sells her patterns under the name The Velvet Acorn. And so I started following her on Instagram because she has some really lovely crochet and knitting patterns. She's got garments, head warmers, scarves, cowls, shawls. She has lots of patterns, and there's quite a few of them that I like to make. But she posted sort of recently on Instagram a new shawl pattern that she has both a crochet and a knitted version. And I've only got it printed out here in black and white, but it's the For Keeps shawl. There it is. So the yarn that she chose to use was really pretty, so that grabbed my attention, and then the tassels really grabbed my attention, and it looked like a fairly simple stitched pattern, which it is. It's just half double crochets, or a half treble in UK terms. So on the way to Skate, actually we were going to Hunters Hill Quilt Show first. So on the way to Hunters Hill Quilt Show, I downloaded the pattern, purchased the pattern and downloaded it. I thought, this is it. This is what I'm going to buy yarn for. So the yarn that I bought for this one, and she used the pattern called for, I printed the pattern, I ran the wrong way. I stapled it together. She called for a merino DK. She used merino DK by Hedgehog Fibers in Cereal, and she also used Republic of Wool in Blushing. So it required a DK yarn, and then she used a different yarn for the fringing. She used Barnyard Knits Worsted Loft and Barnyard Knits Worsted Rustic Oak. And okay, so she's made a couple of different shawls in these colours. I think that's what it is. But anyway, so basically you just pick your own colours anyway. But I knew the quantity that I needed. So I had previously, which one is not attached with that? So I'd bought so the yarn I bought was Ren and Ollie yarn. And I had bought Ren and Ollie yarn before. I haven't used it yet, but I just really love her yarn. And I had seen this particular colour on Instagram, and I fell in love with it straight away, and then they had it in store. So there's pictures of it on my Instagram when it was still skeined up, but this is the ball. Look at all those colours. So pretty. So it's like mostly a dusty pink colouring, but then it's got brown speckles and pink and blue and even bits of green speckles in there, and then like nice sort of oaty colour. So this is called Smitten Kitten. So I decided this was going to be my main body yarn, and then I wanted to do a bit of a contrasting yarn in there, so I picked up this one as well by Ren and Ollie. The two together. So this is it's like an ivory lemony yellow colour, and then it's got speckles of yellow and pink and brown and little speckles of blue in there. So I thought those two together looked really nice. The yarn is her Spin DK 100% Superwash Merino, 115 grams, 230 meters. This is Parfait, and this is Smitten Kitten. So that's the yarn that I chose. So I've started, and I'm actually surprised at how I've only worked on this. So what happened was I started it, and I couldn't work out the stitch count properly. So then I took it to the last Brown Hours meeting, and got my mum to help me. So I ripped it out and started it again. Because what was happening was I wasn't getting these sort of, what would you call them? I'll call them eyelets, but I wasn't getting these, weren't lining up for me. But this is so far my shawl. So I've only worked on this 3 times. So I started it, I did the initial start, and then I worked on it. It's sort of my Saturday night project. So I worked on it one Saturday night, and then I worked on it another Saturday night. And this is how far I've gotten. So it's all, I won't give it away too much, but it's all like half trebles, and then there's a break where it's a bit of a different stitch, and that's where I'm using my contrasting thread for 2 rows. Yeah. So I love it. I love the colour. I love how the yarn is crocheting up with all those different speckles in there. The fringing, I'm going to just use both of my yarns for the fringing. And yeah, I decided to make the small size. So technically, I only have another couple of rows to go, and then I have to do the border. So I'm actually thinking, I wonder if that's going to be... I didn't do a gauge swatch because it kind of confused me. I started to do the gauge swatch and I was like, this isn't working. I was using the right size yarn and the right size hook, but I was not getting anywhere near for the amount of stitches that I had to single crochet, like chains. It was not going anywhere near. So I thought, yeah, I'll just start. So I'm thinking I might need to do the large size because it's not really, the tails of this is not really long enough this way yet to wrap around. And the crochet border is only, I think, 4 rows. So I think I might continue. I think if I don't have enough yarn, it's not a massive deal. I am alternating because a whole heap of my yarn just fell off the ball. I hand wound my balls and a whole heap of it just fell off. I'm alternating between the 2 skeins that I got because one did seem to have more dark areas in it than the other. So every 2 rows I'm changing my yarn. So if I had to buy another skein of this, I don't think it would make much of a difference to the overall look because I've been alternating anyway. That's what I kind of feel like. And then if I have to buy another skein, most of that skein will probably go into the fringing anyway. So I don't think it will make much difference if I have to get another skein, and I'll just yarn bath all over the floor. So yeah, I'll just see if I can quickly wind this up. Tink's in here, and I don't want her coming over and deciding that my yarn will be a fantastic toy to play with. There you go. So my ball's looking a little squashed now. I found a great tutorial on how to do a very simple center pull ball, and I think I've gotten the hang of it now. So it's starting to look a little squashed now. So that's my shawl. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm not sure when I finish it if I'll get much wear out of it now that it's coming into spring, but for those cooler spring nights I think I'll still maybe be able to get some wear out of it before I to pack it away for next winter, but yeah, so really enjoying that project. I'm keeping it in my, oh, did I show this in the last book? No, because I haven't shown any of this yet. This is really in the acquisitions or the goodies section, but we're at Skein Sisters. I also, Dad bought me for my birthday this amazing project bag. Oh. As soon as we walked in the store, there was a big table of their spotlight. They sort of do like a spotlight indie dyer every month or every couple of months, and when we went in, it was My Creative Garage was the spotlight designer. So they had all her yarn, which was beautiful, but they had quite a few of her project bags, and I saw this project bag, like I immediately spotted it and grabbed it and was like, I'm getting it. And it wasn't the cheapest project bag, but I was like, oh, I'm getting it. I couldn't resist it. And because I don't have many project bags, I'm just starting out with my project bag collection. And it was a really nice, good size for a garment. It's like a garment size or large shawl. It's all strings. And it's got this handle. Inside is just the plain textured grey cotton fabric. It's nice and sturdy. It had to be mine, so Dad ended up buying it for me for my birthday. Thanks, Dad. So that's where my shawl is living, and of course, you know, it coordinates quite nicely with my shawl. Put that back in there. So yeah, so hopefully in another, I should definitely be finished by next podcast because it's working up quite quickly, really. Okay, that's all of my makes in progress, actually. Yes, let's turn the page, have some tea. It's going cold now. Okay, so on to stash and crafty adventures. So as I mentioned, we went to Skein Sisters. We actually went to Hunters Hill Quilt Show first, and then we went just across town a bit to Skein Sisters. So I'm going to put in some footage of the Hunters Hill Quilt Show and our trip into Skein Sisters. So I'll insert that now. Okay, so as you can see, Skein Sisters, I literally wanted to live there. I wanted to move in and live there. It was just, oh, it was wonderful. So much beautiful yarn, and they have a really big selection of knitting and crochet magazines, all of the ones that you can't buy just in our news agencies here, where we get most of our craft magazines. So all the, like Lane, Pom Pom, Cole magazine, which I bought a copy, which I didn't bring down to show, but what else? The Woods one, I can't think of the name now, but yeah, so all of and they've got a really nice big selection of books as well. And then what I really liked was they had a lot of sample makes, so a lot of sample knitted and crocheted shawls and sweaters and jumpers, and yeah, lots of patterns. And they have Quince & Co yarn. My voice went a bit funny then. Quince & Co yarns, and I can't even remember, but as you guys saw, there was just beautiful, beautiful yarns. So as well as my Ren and Ollie yarn, I bought another 3 skeins, and it was really hard. I had a couple of other skeins, and I was tallying up in my head how much I was spending. I was like, oh, I can't do that. I'll just get these ones. So I got these. So I got this Hedgehog Fibers one. Look at those colours. So this is the Skinny Singles, and the colour is Beach Bunny. And it is beautiful, so soft. I think I have another Skinny Singles one that's a Hedgehog Fibers. Not sure, but I saw this and I was like, that's mine. And then they had some Primrose Yarn Co. And this is where I struggled a bit because there was a few of hers that I really liked. But in the end, I went with these 2. So this one is Sassy, and it's got lots of this gorgeous peachy pink colour, and then there's bits of aqua blue, and yeah, look at that. And then this one is Soda Pop, so that's softer lemony ivory yellowy colours, and some of that pink, bits of purple. Look at that. So I settled on these 3 because I thought that they would be nice together in a 3-coloured shawl. Because they all have each other's colours in them. So I'm not sure yet what the shawl pattern will be. It'll have to be crochet because there's no way I'm ready for a knitted shawl yet. So yeah, I'm on the hunt for a 3-colour shawl. I'm thinking something lacy because it's fingering weight. It's definitely going to have to be a lacy shawl pattern. So yeah, I'm on the hunt. So if you've got, if you know of any 3-colour shawl patterns, crochet shawl patterns, do let me know. Tag me on Instagram or put a link or a name in the comments on this podcast. Just beautiful. Beautiful yarn. So that's my yarny acquisitions. And then at the quilt show, they didn't have many patchwork vendors. In the past, they've had quite a few, but they only had one patchwork vendor there, which was Material Obsession. So I I didn't go overboard. I just bought 2 fat quarters. These 2. So this one is, I'll unfold it a little bit. Pretty butterflies and dragonflies. And this one is a nice big floral. Some butterflies in there as well, actually. So I was drawn to them. I don't know what they're going to be yet. They might be project bags or might go into a quilt, but it'll just go into my stash for the moment. And I bought 2 Liberty little roll Liberty fabric ones. Yeah, that's my fabric and stash. And then the only other thing that I've bought recently since the last podcast was a couple of new enamel pins, which I've put on my mini pin pennet. So I got this little sheep and the crafty lady. So they are from Twill and Print. They're in Canada. I'll put links in the show notes, but that's all the details. Focusing. It's a bit hard, I think, with that style of writing. But yeah, Twill and Print. So yeah, so it hangs up in my little maker station. So that's all my yarny and crafty bits and bobs that I have gotten. I haven't been going too crazy, apart from my big spend in Skein Sisters. Okay, let's move on. That's cold now. Yuck, there's nothing worse than cold tea. Okay, in other news, this was something that was pretty exciting for me. It was one of my bucket list items or goals, crafty dream goal, and that was to be published in a magazine. So a few months ago now, actually back in like March, I think. No, February, March. It was really hot, so towards the end of summer. I was contacted by an editor for Stampington Publications. She had seen a picture of my studio on my Instagram feed and contacted me about being featured in a new publication that they were coming out with. The new publication was going to be called In Her Studio, and it was all about makers, artists and crafters and their studios. So of course I jumped at the chance, and I had to very quickly take photos of my studio. So my studio has never looked so clean and tidy. So I had to take photos, and then I wrote my own article. So I followed a whole series of questions, prompts that they asked, and wrote my article. And finally, in August, the magazine came out. So here it is, In Her Studio. And it is wonderful. There are so many beautiful studios in here. There's a couple of other Australian makers appeared in here as well. But this is mine. I cannot tell you how excited I was when I received this in the mail. I was like, ah! It's here. I'm in print. I can't believe it. Me and my studio are in print. So one of the other things that they asked us to do was write down a playlist, 10 songs that we like to listen to when we're in our studios working. And to be honest, like, I do listen to music sometimes when I'm in my studio, but most of the time when I'm making, which is, you know, at night when I'm crafting and sewing, I watch podcasts. So when I sent it back to them, I said, I don't really listen to music, but I watch podcasts. So I've shared 10 of my favorite podcasts. So here are my top 10 favorite podcasts. I have like 56 subscribed podcasts on YouTube. So whittling them down to 10 was quite hard. But there's my 10 podcasts. And there we go. Look, there I am. I'm in a magazine. So, amazing. So that was really exciting. And this sort of leads on to, I'm backwards and forwards a bit, but I have to thank Sandy by the Lakeside, lovely Sandy, who mentioned this magazine and mentioned me on her latest podcast episode, because she had seen this magazine and she'd picked it up and she flipped through it, but she didn't buy it straight away. And then someone mentioned to her, have you seen this magazine? Did you know that you're in it? And Sandy was like, no, I've seen it, but I didn't know I was in it. And so she went back and she had another look and she found my article because of course in my podcast list, I had mentioned that Sandy by the Lakeside podcast was one of my favorite podcasts. So she purchased the magazine then, and she very kindly mentioned me and my website and my Etsy shop on her latest episode. So I have to thank Sandy very much. Yeah, I really love watching your podcast, so thank you so much for mentioning me on yours. And yeah, if you don't already watch Sandy's podcast, you should definitely go and check it out, because that's one of my favorites for a reason. And yeah, so that was pretty exciting. So in other crafty bits and things that I've been involved in, I've just finished, along with many other quilters, the Great British Quilter Instagram Challenge, which I did last year and I really enjoyed, so I participated this year again. You should definitely check out the hashtag Great British Quilter. There's so much inspiration there from quilters, not just in Britain but all over the world. And a big thank you to Sarah Ashford's studio and Kerry Berry, who ran it this year, and there'll be links to their Instagram feeds in the show notes. And I should say, you'll find the show notes to this podcast on my blog, and there'll be a link to that in the description bar down below. I keep not looking at the camera. But yeah, so I really enjoyed participating in that. Found lots of new lovely quilters to follow on Instagram. And yeah, it's always lots of fun. I don't do many of them, but yeah, I really enjoy participating in Instagram challenges like that, because you find and discover so many new quilters or crocheters, and it just helps grow this amazing community of craft that we have. So yeah, I really enjoy that. So I just wanted to give that a little mention. Okay, so next on to the Sunday Scrap Along. Yay! Okay, so the Sunday Scrap Along, I mentioned in the last podcast, and there's a big blog post about it on my blog. But I started the Sunday Scrap Along in August, and it is running to December. And it is basically just on Sundays you work on a scrap project. It can be any kind of crafty scrap project. So it can be patchwork, sewing, quilting, knitting, crochet, felting, weaving, anything that where you could, ceramics even, like if you're using scraps or leftovers of the item or the materials that you make with, that counts in the Sunday Scrap Along. There's a couple of guidelines. I won't run through them all here, but they'll be listed in the show notes, and then you can also check out the blog post. They're also listed in Instagram and in Ravelry. But the main thing is that 70% of your project must be made from scraps. So you can participate on Instagram using the hashtag Sunday Scrap Along 2018, and then there's also threads in the Ravelry group where you can participate as well. At the moment there's not too much participation happening in Ravelry, I think just because my Ravelry group is fairly new, and I'm still getting used to using Ravelry and going into the forums and groups and things. It's hard for me to find the time. I'm on Instagram all the time. That's probably the best place to interact with me is Instagram. But yeah, so at the moment it's mostly happening on Instagram, but do feel free to go into the Ravelry group as well and post your finished items or your makes in progress. There are 2 threads. So I'm having lots of fun. It's been really great seeing your scrappy projects, and I did my first giveaway a week or 2 ago, so I've sent that package off to the first giveaway winner, which was super exciting to do, and very lovely to send off some handmade goodies, some of my handmade goodies to a lovely quilter who has been participating. Okay, so all right, we'll keep on the theme of crafting community. I did want to do a couple of podcast shout outs, as I do love to spread the love and the joy of crafty podcasts, and I love to find new crafty podcasts, particularly sewing patchwork ones, but I love watching any kind of creative podcast really. So today I've already given a shout out to Sandy by the Lakeside, but there'll be a link to her Instagram and podcast in the show notes. And then I have 2 other podcasts that I wanted to share this episode, and the first one is the Love to Sew podcast by the lovely Caroline, or Carolyn, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Carolyn? I think it's Carolyn. And in her most recent podcast, she has been joined by her, okay, the joys of filming on your iPhone. Sorry about the interruption. I just had a work phone call come through. So, all right, I was saying. So, the Love to Sew podcast, Caroline has been joined by her adorable friend Helen, who is Flora Honeypot on Instagram. And these 2 ladies together are just the funniest. There's so many giggles, and it's just great. If you haven't already watched Caroline's podcast, definitely go back and check it out and watch her previous episodes and her latest episodes with Helen, because the 2 of them together, they just feed off each other, and it is just it always leaves me with a very light-hearted feeling, and yeah, they're just beautiful. And I chat to Helen a little bit on Instagram, and she's so adorable, so funny, and the giggles are aplenty when watching that podcast. And Carolyn has she has an Etsy shop. Oh, actually no, sorry, she still has an Etsy shop, but she's actually just opened a new website shop. So if that's open at the time that I put this up, I will include that link in the show notes. So she does I think she only started to learn to knit a year or 2 ago. So it's a knitting and sewing and crochet podcast. Carolyn makes project bags, and she sells them in her shop, and she sells some other things as well. But yeah, definitely check them out because they are two beautiful ladies. And the other podcasts that I've been watching a lot of late, I've been watching all the back episodes of Sweet Sparrow Knits podcast, which is Julie Rose, and she's a indie yarn dyer. I'm sure you all already know who she is, but she makes beautiful yarns, and she has beautiful projects, knitting projects, and she also does some sewing projects as well, some like sewing garment projects. And yeah, she's just, as the name implies, she's incredibly sweet and just really lovely, and I really enjoy watching her podcast, and I've been enjoying all her back episodes. So I've been binge watching her a little bit. So yeah, definitely check her out, and there'll be links to her Instagram and her podcast and her shop in the show notes. Okay, so just a couple of things left to talk about. It's going to be quite a long episode. Well done if you've stuck it out this far. I've got a big market coming up in November, the Etsy Made Local Market, which I'm also one of the organisers for. So a lot of what I've been making, apart from my miniature quilts and my knitting and my crochet project, a lot of what I've been sewing will be items for my market stall, and some of them I will also put in my Etsy shop. But at night, I've just been doing a lot of hexie piecing. This is what I've been up to. So thought I'd just quickly show you. I've been making more hexie hearts. These are 3/8 inch ones. So these ones I think are going to be made, or they're going to be appliqued onto and made into some either small project bags or like notions pouches possibly. Haven't quite decided. I've just been piecing. Just been on a piecing hexie heart flower frenzy. I started to make some flowers as well, so they'll be put onto something. And then I've made a whole heap of my 1/4 inch hexie hearts. I think I've got 10 altogether. Heaps. So they'll be made into my hexie heart like hoop, kind of like these hoops here. Yeah. And they're like for wall hangings. So I've been a busy bee. That's what I've been doing at night. Been doing lots of piecing, and I've also got all of these ready to go. These are all going to be turned into, so they're a 3/8 inch flower, and they're all going to be turned into pin cushions. So I think I've got 15, maybe. I think I've got about 15 there. So they're all going to be turned into pin cushions. So I've just been doing a lot of piecing, and now I'm going to have to start actually putting them together and actually making them into a finished object. So that's what a lot of my sewing time has gone into the last few weeks, and will continue now. I'll be heavily into market and shop prep and makes. Okay, so just to finish off, I just thought I'd have a bit of a chit-chat session. If you've stuck around this long, thank you so much. But I like to share just not what I'm making, but just what's happening in general in the Miss Leela creative world. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of finding crafty friends, and I thought I'd just briefly chat about this because I love meeting and making new crafty friends, finding people that understand your innate desire and addiction to make and to, sit in the comfort of your home and just sew for hours on end. And I think it's really important finding people that understand that need that you have, because it does take up so much of, I know it takes up so much of my time. And if I go a day without doing something creative, whether it's crochet, knitting, or sewing, particularly sewing, if I go more than a day without sewing, I have serious withdrawals. I just do not feel like my day has been completed if I do not sit down and set hands sew for a couple of hours at night. So finding friends that you can share your creative passions with, but also share the other side of your life with, your other daily, health problems, or, whinging about your child that's not eating food properly, and and all that sort of thing. I think it's really important finding friends that you can share that with. And the reason I bring this up is because I've recently made and found a friend who I sort of now call my crafty soul sister, because she's a new friend and we've only met up twice and had like coffee and morning tea and a chat. But it was very effortless and very natural, and it felt so wonderful to find someone that understands so much about what you're going through in just general life, and and sharing your creative dreams and your passions with. So I just wanted to give her, I'm not sure if she's watching this podcast or not, but if she is, I just wanted to say thank you, Madeline, for becoming my new crafty soul sister friend, because I adore you. You're fantastic. She is the maker behind Ecolia Kids. You can find her Etsy shop, Ecolia Kids. I'll put a link in the show notes. And Madeline makes gorgeous children's clothes, a very nostalgic sort of style. Her whole thing is about making timeless pieces that grow with the child. So she makes these adorable smock style dresses that, as your child grows, the way that she's designed them, they can then wear them again as a smock style t-shirt over, some leggings or shorts and that sort of thing. And she makes the most adorable bonnets. So yeah, I just wanted to chat just a little bit about that, because it's so important finding people that you can share things with, and that you feel understand you and don't judge you for the choices you make in life, spending so much time crafting. And it's nice to find someone, like, I'm a very big introvert. I love nothing more than just being at home and crafting. But I do understand, and I do need that social interaction. I just don't need it every day of the week. But that's why I started going to my local Brown Hours group, because we meet once a month, and that's lovely to get out of the house, take your knitting or your crochet or your sewing or whatever you're making, and go and chat to other crafty ladies. And, it's lovely meeting up with, your crafty friends over coffee and tea, and gives you a bit of a break. So yeah, I just want to talk. And of course then there's the massive community that is growing constantly on Instagram, YouTube, which is wonderful to be a part of as well. So other things just in general life, little Miss Tilly is driving me insane at the moment. She has gone into this, I think we've definitely hit the terrible twos stage of toddler, and the thing that we're struggling most with her is food and eating. She just, it's been going on for a while, but it seems to be getting worse. She's just, all she wants to eat is snack food, or she loves eating fruit, which is fantastic, but getting her to actually eat a decent meal, like at dinner time, is just beyond. It's just getting beyond. She'll eat meat. Sometimes she'll eat pasta. Sometimes she'll eat rice, but she doesn't eat any vegetables or... And part of me is like, just don't worry about it, Leela. It's just, all kids go through. It's just a stage. But then the other, you know, she'll grow out of it. But then the other part of me is like, I don't want her developing bad habits. Her father never really ate properly. Still doesn't eat properly. He still doesn't eat a lot of vegetables and like really like good healthy food. Like he's a lot better than now that like we've been living together, because if I make it and he doesn't eat it, then that's tough luck. But yeah, so part of me is like, just don't worry about it. She'll grow out of it. And then the other part of me, but I don't want her developing bad habits. So I'm just like, And then she's really starting to challenge us now as well. Like, you ask her to do something and it'll be no. And she's got like this cheeky smile on her face, and you kind of want to like laugh at her and like laugh and just... But the other part is she's, you know, got to be serious. You've got to show that you're serious. You mean it. So, fun and games. But then the other part of this age is absolutely wonderful, because she's learning so much and picking up so much. Learning, she's talking so much more, putting more words together. She has learned how to count backwards from 10, which I think is just amazing. She misses 7 for whatever reason. When she counts 1 to 10, she says 7, but counting 10 to 1, for whatever reason, she just can't get her mouth around it and she misses it every time. So yeah, she's a bit more interested in things now. Like we went to the Australian Reptile Park a couple of weeks ago on our way home from a trip up the coast. However, she was more interested in playing on the playground than the animals. So we're like, come on, Tilly, let's go look at the kangaroos and the koalas. And she's like, no, I just want to play on the playground. And I'm like, I didn't pay all this money for us to come in here for you to play on a playground, that we could go to any park and play on a playground. But so that was interesting, but yeah. And yeah, we've had a bit of sickness. As I mentioned, I've had a chest cold, and then before that, Tilly had a 24-hour tummy bug. That was pleasant. And then, of course, Tilly got my cold as well, so she's had a runny nose. But she's getting better now. She hasn't had a runny nose for a couple of days and stuff. So it just feel like there's just a cycle of, you know, sickness, get better, get sick again, get better. But anyway. And in other things that I've been doing, the other weekend I met up with another crafty friend, and we went and we went to Mount Vic Flicks, which is a old cinema in Mount Victoria, which is at the very top of the Blue Mountains. And they had a special screening of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, the movie that came out in 1990 something or other, with Kate Winslet and Hugh Grant and Emma Watson. I think it's Emma Watson. But yeah, I love that movie. And so we went along and we watched that. And we didn't know, but the day or the night before that, they had a Jane Austen like convention kind of thing up the mountains. And they had they did a lot of like traditional, like the dancing that they used to do back then. So like people in costumes doing the dancing and stuff. And yeah, so they had some of those people came and they did a couple of like traditional dances before the movie screening, and then they also had a guest speaker come and talk about a garment that I can't remember who has the original now. It's somewhere in England. But I can't remember the lady's name either, but she came and she spoke about how she recreated Jane Austen's, and I can't even think of what the garment's called, but it's kind of like a long jacket, almost dress kind of garment. and she had the garment there and she showed us the garment and stuff. So that was really interesting. Not that I can't remember any of the details because that's the kind of brain that I have. But yeah, that was really interesting. And then we watched the movie and that was lovely. So yeah, that was a nice little, just something different. I love Jane Austen. I love the movies, adaptions, the BBC adaptions. I've only read 3. I can't actually remember if I've read Sense and Sensibility or not. I've read Emma and I've read Pride and Prejudice. And I think I've read Sense and Sensibility, but maybe it's just because I've seen the movie so many times, I think I have. But anyway, so yeah, I'd love to read through all of Jane's novels. It's just finding time. I love to read, but it's finding the time to read because so often all I just want to do is sew. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. I'm not sure how long this podcast is, but I think it's time to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a lovely, creative, crafty time. Until we speak again, bye.